The following clip is an excerpt from a video I made back in 2020 called 1984 Is 2020 The Death of Freedom Has Come. The video is a book review and analysis of George Orwell's classic dystopian novel 1984 and is an attempt to show how the concepts in the book manifest themselves in the real world today. If you haven't read the book, just know that the main character's name is Winston Smith, and he lives in a place called Oceania, which is a totalitarian police state that maintains its power through malicious irony, lies, thought policing, brainwashing, destruction of history, propaganda, torture, and surveillance, among other things. Just think North Korea. It's as close to a copy of Orwell's nightmare regime as you can get. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I here present to you the clip that you actually wanted to watch when you clicked on this video. Now let's move on to surveillance. I'm going to read this passage and you tell me if this sounds familiar. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. How often or on what system the thought police plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork. It was even conceivable that they watched everybody all the time, but at any rate, they could plug in your wire whenever they wanted to. You had to did live, from habit that became instinct, and the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and, except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. So in Oceania, they have telescreens, they have microphones on the walls, listening to you, watching you all day long, and you're like, we don't have those things watching us all the time. Well, yeah we do, and it's worse. They're in our fucking pockets, okay? These things are listening to us all the time. They're listening to me talking about them listening to us. And now, is there a person actually listening? Probably not yet. But the point is that the technology, the surveillance technology that is presented in 1984 exists now. And when that technology falls into the hands of very, very bad people, I fear the Orwellian surveillance state very well may become wholly real. It's very quickly becoming wholly real in places like China. And God forbid it becomes wholly real in the United States, but Orwell wrote this book in many ways out of a feeling of hopelessness that this was inevitable, and I fear that he may have been right. Now, this next passage doesn't necessarily have to do with surveillance, but it does have to do with, in an odd way, Twitter. I'm going to read this passage and I'll explain. The thing that he was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal, since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labor camp. With regards to Twitter and Facebook and a lot of these social media things, there's not laws. Yes, they have their community guidelines, but they change those all the time, and lots of times they ban people without even displaying that somebody violated a community guideline. Point is the part where it says nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws, but if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished. That is applicable, I think, to places like Twitter, because there are many, many things that Twitter has censored, and along with Facebook, or just people that they've banned for ridiculous reasons that are not illegal and that don't even violate their own community guidelines, and yet they do it. And so, if you're detected for being unorthodox in your opinions and your statements on places like Twitter, maybe you have more conservative views, or maybe you're just going against the flow, there is a chance that you may someday just get banned even though you didn't do anything wrong, both legally or according to the community guidelines that are presented by these monopolistic companies. I think it's an interesting parallel. And now for the last passage on surveillance, this is basically a description. And remember, this was written in 1948, 49, okay? And this was all the way back then. But this right here is a description of the modern era. The technology exists, people. The technology exists. Let me read. In the past, no government had the power to keep its citizens under constant surveillance. The invention of print, however, made it easier to manipulate public opinion, and the film and the radio carried the process further. With the development of television and the technical advance which made it possible to receive and transmit simultaneously on the same instrument, private life came to an end. Every citizen, or at least every citizen important enough to be worth watching, could be kept for 24 hours a day under the eyes of the police and in the sound of official propaganda, with all other channels of communication closed. The possibility of enforcing not only complete obedience to the will of the state, but complete uniformity of opinion on all subjects now existed for the first time. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it exists. And if a totalitarian regime gets in control of the US, it's not like they're not going to use this technology. It's not like they're not going to use it for ill will.